All right, guys, Bob Knakal is on the podcast again. Bob is unbelievable. What a person. Seriously, when you talk about superstar, I think the definition in the Wikipedia should say Bob Knakal or in dictionary.com. Superstar Bob Knakal.
Alon, thank you so much. It's too kind, too kind.
It's my pleasure. This guy is the biggest commercial broker in the world right now. Extremely active, has some of the best stories you could ever imagine. And my co-host David Avgia is also a big broker. He's specifically in the boroughs and in the residential space, but he's been really excited to ask you some questions.
Oh, awesome.
I'm happy you're here. I'm happy we could get into it again.
Great, happy to be here. Always great to see you, Alon.
Bob, question that I have for you. This is something that I want to know. What was a major stepping stone in your career where everything transitioned for you and you felt like, boom, I'm here?
The major stepping stone was actually getting into the real estate business.
I love that.
I thought I wanted to be an investment banker. I walked into a place called Coldwell Banker thinking it was a bank, and I got a job my summer between freshman and sophomore year in college. Went back my next 2 summers, started with them in New York when I got out of school. That was the biggest stepping stone for my career. Transitioning, I'd say once I was a broker, the thing that really was like an inflection point in my career was absolutely right after the S&L crisis. We started Massey Knakal in 1988. S&L crisis took hold, and by the time the RTC got involved and was forcing banks to sell properties in 1992, 93, 94, we were selling a ton of properties for banks, and that was really a big inflection point, and the company took off after that.
Wow, incredible.
Bob, I want you to hit us with stories because you're the story king. A lot of us don't know what you've done and these crazy stories that have happened behind the scenes that's so fascinating. So hit us with a story. I'm going to be more specific here. A deal that came together that you sold and resold years later where somebody made an absolute fortune. Fill us in.
Yeah, well, I think the one you're talking about is we had put a development site under contract on Broadway between 29th and 30th. It was under contract. The buyer wanted a long-term closing. They wanted 9 months to close. They put up a $10 million deposit on a $90 million sale. Ended up forgetting the closing was coming up because it was 9 months. And by that time, the market had changed a little bit. They defaulted on their $10 million deposit, walked away from the transaction. We got another buyer, came in, ended up selling the property for a lower price, but the seller ended up in about the same place because they ended up keeping the deposit. But, so many of these stories go in different directions. I'll tell you, follow me on LinkedIn and on Twitter. I tell these stories every Tuesday in the Testimonial Tuesday post. There's a story about a deal, a twist, a turn, the way we overcame things. Fortunately, having been around for so long, I think I've seen every possible way that a buyer tries to gain an advantage and a seller tries to gain an advantage, and a lot of these are reflected in the stories that we're posting online.
So that's the story of somebody losing a $10 million deposit.
Now, let's get into this. Where do you see the market going right now? There's a lot of sounds out there in the market. You're hearing everything. Interest rates are up, the market's scary, the market's good, it's opportunity zone. What do you really see from your end?
Well, I think the biggest difference between this correction and corrections in the past is that in the savings and loan crisis of early 90s, recession of early 2000s, great financial crisis, the markets were all moving in the same direction. They were moving down. Different product types would go down by different percentages, but they were all moving at the same in the same direction. Today, different product types are reacting differently. The multifamily market is fairly good. Cap rates are up, but the demand is robust, rents are going up, so fundamentals are pretty decent in that space. Retail's a bright spot. Retail rents were going down for 5 years, they stopped going down, leasing activity is picking up, investors are calling, looking for retail properties these days.
Yeah.
But the office sector is somewhat challenged. New construction, Class A office doing great. Everything else has challenges, and we're going to see a lot of conversions of that space. The land market completely dried up for rental housing because there's no tax abatement program. Condo land doing well, down from where it was in September because construction lending has gotten so expensive, so values are down a bit, but each sector of the market's moving differently. I think the one thing I tell everybody is take heart. The market has been, is, and always will be cyclical, and it's going to come back, and it's going to be great. Just hang in there and wait for it to come back. It will come back, and it's going to come back really
100%.
strong.
Invest smart, don't over leverage, and hold on tight, and you'll see the swing going.
Yeah, look, in some sectors, we have property values per square foot that are the same as they were 15 or 20 years ago. This is a great time to be buying. Everybody says buy property when everybody's fearful, and the thing that makes markets work is that it's a constant battle between fear and greed, whether the market's good or the market's bad. When the market's good, greed wins. When the market's bad, fear wins. Fear is winning today. When fear is winning and prices are where they were 15, 20 years ago, buy property. I'm telling everybody, buy. Now, ask people who have been investing for decades. They'll tell you the best deals they ever made were at times when everybody was afraid to buy. That's exactly where we are today.
Bob, I look out on 10 years, 20 years, 100 years. If I wanted to buy a property today in New York City and make an absolute fortune without doing much in the next decade, what would you suggest if you were in my shoes to look at buying?
Okay, so buy something and don't do a lot of work. Buy a development site, knock the buildings down, get your taxes reduced because there are no buildings there. Come back in 10 years, I think that's at least a 3X, probably a 4X on your money.
Really? Really?
Absolutely.
We got to start.
So you're saying buy buildings, cheap buildings in the city?
Buy land, buy land. Land in New York is rarely land. Sometimes it's a parking lot, but it's rarely just vacant land. You have to knock down crummy little buildings and create a development site, but knock the buildings down, put a fence up, fight your taxes, get your taxes down, wait for better days ahead. When the land market goes up, it's really going to go up fast. It's going to go up a lot. We're at a really low point in the market. I think now's the time to buy.
Wow, guys, you see, that's a suggestion. I wouldn't have even thought of that. But this guy's fingers are on the pulse in Manhattan. He sees things that we don't see.
Bob, one thing, what are you doing today? What's something that you want to highlight? What's your new direction? Where are you going?
Well, we're doing a lot of land sales, a lot of development site stuff. As I said, I think buying land is a great buy. But from a brokerage perspective, at JLL we have a lot of resources. I'm selling the land, doing the acquisition loan, raising the equity, doing the construction loan, doing the takeout loan. 4 or 5 commissions for one piece of property.
I love it.
Wow.
And for all you agents out there, be a jack of all trades, right? There's ways to make money in multiple different directions. Don't just be one thing. Get your head outside the box, start building up knowledge, and get yourself out there.
Now I got a question for you about stabilized housing in the city.
Okay.
How do you see that market? Because now there's changes coming, right? There's a lot of units they're vacant. They're not up for rent. They're just sitting vacant and they're stabilized. The city needs to make changes to get those occupied. What do you see coming?
Well, one thing I'll say is that the solution to all the housing problems in New York is on the supply side. And if you don't believe in economics textbook, just look at what happened during the pandemic. People moved out of the city, vacancy increased. Vacancy increases the same as increasing supply. Rents dropped 30%.
Correct.
So if politicians really want rents to drop, create new supply, create incentives for new supply. The reason that tens of thousands of units are sitting vacant that were previously stabilized, there's no financial incentive to invest in those apartments today because the IAI and the MCI programs were marginalized. The tax abatement program, the 421A/Affordable New York, doesn't exist. So all of the things that can be done, implementing a 421G tax abatement program to incentivize the conversion of office buildings to residential, all these things could be done to create more supply. So if you are a free market tenant in New York City and you think your rent's too high, look no further than to talk to your local council person, your local assembly person, your local senator, your mayor, your governor. It's their fault your rent's so high because they won't create new supply. If they would create new supply, your rent would not go up as much as it's going to go up.
I couldn't agree more.
Wow.
And right now we're sitting on under 1% vacancy in Manhattan, which is insane.
You know, when I talk to Bob, it's like he tells me these things and I feel like it hits me at the chest, but I need time to digest it. It's like, wow, what great
Always trying to
feedback.
connect the dots. I've never seen a time where real estate and politics were more closely tied. where policy is impacting things. We're in, most people consider it a challenging market. Why is the residential space doing well? Because of policy, because of externalities. So become politically aware, understand how policy is impacting property values, supply and demand. It's very important because there's never been a higher correlation between public policy and the way the real estate markets are operating.